You are Locked On Wolverines POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Detroit on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And here we go, a live Locked On Wolverines post-game show starts right now. Welcome in. My name is Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma. This is the Locked On Wolverines post-game show, and it's exactly that. It's a post-game reaction show. It's not anything different than a Locked On Wolverines, and we're not replacing Locked On Wolverines or anything like that. I just want to make that clear right away that this is your Locked On Wolverines post-game show. Hey, what we've got on tap for you, a tough night in Norman. Very conservative plan all the way around. We will sound off on that. Bryce Underwood and the rest of the offense really held back, in my opinion, by a conservative approach. The Sherrone Moore suspension is now activated after this one. We'll talk about the impact that has on the Wolverines moving forward. And, of course, we'll have our biggest talking point, our turning point, and our player of the game. It's all next, so buckle up and dial it in. The beauty of these live shows is we can take comments all night long. So go ahead and fire up that comment section as well. And let's get into it. The Wolverines fall in Norman, Oklahoma to the Oklahoma Sooners. Final score 24-13. And Sherrone Moore comes up empty against his alma mater. Now, as always, we start with the biggest takeaway, the biggest talking point, what you would tell a friend about this game before we get into any kind of game summaries or, turning point moments or anything like that. Just what do you say when you walk away from this one? And to me, it's pretty simple. This Michigan Wolverines approach was way too conservative, and that's what we'll be talking about.
This is what you'll be talking about.
Look, I understand Bryce Underwood, young kid. You're trying to protect him. You're trying to create a game plan that will let him flourish without the cost of putting him in vulnerable spots. And that's what offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey and the rest of that offensive staff, their desire and their goal was tonight, going into a hostile environment on the road, just his second career start, heavyweight matchup, the only matchup of ranked opponents in week 2 of the college football slate. But listen, at some point, you got to take the training wheels off. And I don't begrudge Bryce Underwood on that. The entire first half was a display of conservative play calling, conservative everything as it relates to battling it out on the gridiron. It was just way too conservative. And even the decisions, and I made notes here, a couple of decisions throughout the course of the broadcast, or of course of the game, where it's just a conservative play calling. And you saw the frustration boil up to the point of what we would call a heated exchange, I suppose, between Bryce Underwood and Justice Haynes. And look, I don't think there's anything to make of that. I really don't. I think that happens through the course of a typical game. And, obviously those two fierce competitors are going to be, strap it up and at the end of the day, lay it all on the line for one another. But that is a product, I think, of a very talented defense in Oklahoma. Can't take anything away from them. Brett Venables is known for his defensive prowess. That's how he became a head coach. And he's at times really feasted on young freshman quarterback, even going all the way back to his time at Clemson. That was kind of one of his calling cards. But when you don't have the creative game plan and offensive approach to even give yourselves a chance, you're playing right into the hands of that intense, fierce defensive game plan where you look in Oklahoma stacking the box. They're blitzing all out. There's just zero respect for a vertical passing threat for this Michigan offense. And you heard Kirk Herbstreit on the call, one of my all-time favorite broadcasters, allude to that, where Oklahoma can sell out to stop the run and stop the short passing game because they know that's what's coming. And even in the second half there, you saw a couple of times on Michigan's field goal drive where they're settling for field goals. You have the big pass down the field for 44 yards to Donovan McCulley, but you go away from that. It was like a one and done feel in that sense, where it just puzzled me without the ability to open up the playbook. And I know that's kind of an easy takeaway, and it is what it is. But this Michigan team is going to try to dominate the line of scrimmage, establish the run game, and not to take anything away from that. Justice Haynes had the 19 carries for 125 yards. Now, obviously, all of that coming from a 75-yard run, the first play from scrimmage in the third quarter. So that's going to be a little bit deceiving from a statistical standpoint. But at the same time, man, this was just tough to watch. And defensively, I think there's a lot to hone in on, and not to take anything away from John Mateer. That's a rushing heavy quarterback that, they were comparing him to Baker Mayfield on the broadcast. I don't think he's quite there yet, but man, Michigan at times struggled with the ability for Mateer to make plays with his legs. And, on the touchdown drive that cost Michigan a couple of times. Now, some good things. Defense forces some turnovers. Special teams force some turnovers. But again, it felt like anytime Michigan garnished any kind of momentum, they fell to conservative, even not just play calling, but to settle for field goals time in and time out. At some point, you got to, and analytically speaking, you would think going for it on fourth down a couple of times would give yourself a better opportunity. And not to take anything away from Zavada, because he's obviously a preseason All-American for a reason, but he misses the one field goal, and the decision to go for 3 instead of going for it on fourth down kind of comes back to bite you in a lot of ways. Now, a lot of comments. In fact, it's just me here tonight, no producer to filter in the comments and go through every single one of them. So I'll try to get to as many as I can. Daniel Schultz is up first, saying the season is over. Cooler heads will say it is not, but we are losing to Nebraska, USC, Washington, and most of all, OSU. Cannot beat OSU with finesse and weakness. I don't think the season's over. Listen, it's an early loss, and it's unfortunate. It's a bummer. It's not a conference loss. Everything's still in front of you as far as your Big Ten goals and aspirations. And with a 12-team playoff format, it's way too early to be declaring the season over. Now, I understand there's a lot that left to be desired in that type of performance that we saw tonight. Luke is up next. Luke Sestito, I hope I pronounced that right. The coaching staff is lost. Can't blame Harbaugh this year. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. And for those that don't know, I host a college football show called Fan University that airs across the Odyssey networks. And we talked about that on the show this morning, that Sherrone Moore doesn't feel like he's just taken over the ownership of the program. And it just feels like he's tried to, almost stay in Harbaugh's shadow a little bit and do everything that Michigan used to do. You got to still have, a sense of ownership of your program and organization and doing everything right, doing the little things right. And that just has a little bit of a trickle down effect. Matsushuta the Fifth. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Apologies if I didn't. O-line was terrible. Yeah, that's another good point. O-line is always an easy scapegoat in football. The quarterback gets sacked. Oh, it's the O-line's fault type of thing. And I get that. But there were times where if Bryce Underwood had a little bit more of a pocket and more time to throw, I think of the one wheel route when it was still a one-score game, that could have been a huge play. I know they stopped the broadcast at that point, or pointed it out on the broadcast, I should say, and it just wasn't. So disappointing there. All right. Mr. Toxic 1999 says, it's a Rich Rod type of season. Mark my words. More fire for the coaching staff. Adam Freshore says coaches were trash today. Lee on the turf says the play calling was so bad. JH says Bryce looked lost. And Jay Scott here says this was a winnable game. Play calling was play calling was disappointing. I agree. There was a couple of third downs I made note of where it was right after the special teams fumble. I'm reading my notes here, so apologize, but there you go, old school notes if anyone's watching on YouTube. But Michigan gets the special teams fumble on the punt, and it's a sudden change. Take a shot. I love a shot. A lot of offensive coordinators will tell you after a sudden change, you've got all the momentum. Take a shot. Go up top. What's the worst thing that can happen? First down run, 3rd and 6 run, field goal attempt. And it just feels like you lose a lot of that momentum when you're settling for 3 and you're just climbing, trying to catch up, but you're not doing it in a way that's an efficient manner because you just can't win the game kicking field goals all the time. All right. Lots of comments here. I'm going to go with Dr. Detroit saying 90% of pass attack is to the tight end and no Klein. Agreed. Yeah. It seems very one-dimensional in the passing attack. That's for sure. We want to keep it rolling here on the live Locked On Wolverines postcast. I appreciate everybody tuning in after a Michigan loss and the Wolverines falling to 1-1. With Sherrone Moore's 2-game suspension looming. He'll be, and not just a suspension for the game, but out all week. He can't be in the building. So I think that's an important distinction when we discuss that. So we'll do that as well as look ahead to Central Michigan and Nebraska, as well as our player of the game and turning point. Don't go anywhere. It's alive. Locked On Wolverines postcast. Hey, this episode of the Locked On Wolverines postcast is brought to you by Mazda. You can just move through life, or you can find the things that move you. It's your choice. You can choose to get out there, choose your people. You can choose to go for it. Like, really, go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It is the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP. And who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Unfortunately, I have to admit, it was John Mateer and the Oklahoma Sooners. And even though you can't win every Saturday on the field with DoorDash streaks, you can win every Saturday, saving more time on every single order. That's right. Just like the players are delivering on the field, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it all up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November the 18th. That's DoorDash. All right, I think we can all objectively look at where this game turned and point distinctly at when Oklahoma took over the game offensively. Michigan had no answer to the tune of a really, really long drive, and that's right, it is, in fact, our turn.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Brace yourselves, this is going to be hard to hear. Oklahoma goes on a 15-play, 78-yard drive, chewing up 8 minutes and 27 seconds. The Wolverines had already used 2 timeouts, so they're unable to stop the clock. You got to keep 1 timeout. And just looking at that drive, my goodness, where to even start? Because it's a 24-13 game, or 21-13 game, I'm sorry, when the drive starts, and it's just there's 10 minutes left on the clock. The game's not over by any means, and this Oklahoma team just chews it up, and play after play, John Mateer running between the tackles. You know it's coming. And Kirk Herbstreit even said this. It was like backyard football out there, and organized backyard football. But the drive, and all they needed was 3, because it makes it a 2-possession game, and that's all they got, because again, that drive just chews up the entire clock. and there is your ball game. So helpless, frustrating to watch, and in the end, that's what does it for the Michigan Wolverines. The long drive for the win for Oklahoma, and they get the win at home. And it just watching that, you had the thought that, okay, at some point Michigan knows what's coming. They have to be able to sell out and stop the run, similar to how Oklahoma was selling out to stop the run against Michigan. But it just seemed like the Sooners had the extra step, and that drive, when it mattered the most, Michigan's defense just could not get off the field. So I don't like doing the blame game. It's this guy's fault, it's that guy's fault, and so on and so forth. But offense needs to be better. Defense needs to be better. And you could say special teams really, I mean, they forced the turnover. There was the roughing the punter on the one, and Michigan's special teams were stout. Okay, let's get into our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
You know, in a losing effort, unfortunately, it's just probably makes most sense to take the player of the game that was John Mateer. I mean, he doesn't do a ton through the air. He throws the one interception. He was 21 of 34 for 270 yards, but rushing 19 carries and the 2 rushing touchdowns. So he accounts for 3 touchdowns total. And again, that is a tough spot for Michigan defensively to be able to cope and stop a running quarterback, because that proved to be the difference tonight. So Wolverines fall, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, Sherrone Moore is in fact suspended the next 2 days, or the next 2 games, Central Michigan and Nebraska. I think with that being said, obviously there's a huge advantage for the Wolverines on papers, taking on Central Michigan, and then we'll see with conference, the Big Ten opener against Nebraska. So appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. As always, Isaiah Hull and Locked On Wolverines will be back to take the deep dive on everything. And as always, we appreciate you liking today's video as we continue with the post-game shows throughout the course of the season. And go ahead and subscribe to Locked On Wolverines if you haven't already. So Michigan falls to 1-1 on the season. Season's not over, not a Big Ten loss. And I don't mean to be the guy that's trying to preach optimism and hope and everything after a tough loss, because that was, in fact, a tough loss, tough one to watch. But there's a lot of football left to be played, that's for sure. And a lot of really talented players on this Michigan team. Just want to see it all come together. So make sure you like today's video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you after the Wolverines take on Central Michigan on Saturday. And it's a noon kick, so a little bit earlier. We get a break from these late night games. So have a wonderful rest of your evening. If you're a Lions fan, we've got Locked On Lions, the post-game show tomorrow after Lions-Packers in the opener for the Detroit Lions. And as always, Locked On Tigers. All the post-game action is with me, Jake Rietma. So I appreciate everyone tuning in. And although Michigan lost, lots more football to be played. Until next time, have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you next time.